Welcome to the Valley Politics History Interviews. I'm Terry Christensen. 1973 was a key turning point in San Jose politics. Sprawling growth was rampant at the time, and community services, including schools, weren't keeping up. Kids in new middle-class neighborhoods were going to schools on double sessions and in temporary classrooms. Then a group of moms decided they'd had enough and got a measure on the ballot to limit new housing development to school capacity. This was San Jose's first real growth control policy, and the measure was vehemently opposed by developers and the city's old guard. Claire Benson was a leader of the movement to manage growth and of the campaign for Measure B in 1973. We aired our interview with Claire in 2017. Here it is in full. Today we're talking with Claire Benson, who was a leader of a 1973 initiative that changed San Jose's growth policies and introduced a whole new generation of political leaders in the city. Claire moved here in 1969 when her husband got a job at GE Nuclear, which was where the plant shopping center is now. Claire and her husband raised 3 kids here. Claire got involved in local politics pretty early on. Later she became a realtor and eventually a planning commissioner for the city. So welcome, Claire Benson.
Thank you, Terry.
Let's start by having you tell us what the Almaden Valley was like when you moved here in 1969.
Well, it was fast growing, of course, but it was limited because there was a growth thing beyond
Growth
McKean
boundary,
Road.
yeah.
Yeah, so we knew what we were doing. And of course, housing was only like 3 times your salary, the cost of a house.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that we were very lucky and were able to live very comfortably. But anyway, all my friends were like people and met through League of Women Voters, PTA.
Is that what got you involved in politics initially in San Jose, the League?
Well, that's the first place I joined when I came here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first day.
The city, the population in 1970, about the time you got here, was 400,000, and the city had grown from 95,000 in 1950, so very rapid growth. And I remember you taking me around Almaden Valley and showing me the sprawling growth that was happening.
Well, it's a fascinating place and has an interesting history in itself.
Oh,
so,
yeah, which we don't have time for today.
No.
But so
like.
you got involved in local politics, and eventually, very quickly actually, 1973 was when Measure B, that's the ballot measure you sponsored. Measure B is the same as the more infamous recent ballot measure on pensions. But this is a different Measure B we're talking about, 1973. So what led you to get involved with that as an issue, with growth management?
I got a job as a census taker in 1970. So I had a chance to take, and had got that district, Almaden and part of Oak Grove and so on. Saw what was happening, the number of vacancies there were.
So you were going door to door?
No, actually I went from track to track.
Track to track, yeah.
Empty houses everywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and then I talked to, after I realized that, I began to think, my heavens, how many kids per household are we talking about? At that time it was 2.9 children per household.
Per house, wow.
As far as the school district was concerned. And you just start multiplying those numbers and seeing, well, if there were 20 units vacant, they were going to each have 3 kids, then how many kids were going to be there? And already we'd gotten into double session, come into double session.
Schools were on double session, so
that meant
some kids went early in the morning.
Right, and then the other group came about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and this left all these children out on their own. Their parents had to either get up really early to feed them breakfast, or they were on their own until...
Some kids were going to school in the dark in the morning, and other kids were coming home in the dark in
and they had to drop a lot of the sports things because they just couldn't figure it in. Now, we didn't just start off with Measure B. We started with trying to find an alternative way for the kids to get some structured programs in the Bret Harte Junior High School by using a big recreation program. And that was all presented to the school board as an alternative. But they turned it down, or at least they didn't move forward with it. And it would have been complicated. And then we would go to the city council and ask them to not approve more subdivisions, that we just couldn't handle the number of children that were coming.
The schools couldn't accommodate the
Right.
number of kids that were coming out of the new
Right.
subdivisions, so you asked the council to limit growth, basically, to limit
Right, to
new
stop
subdivisions, new
approving
housing.
new ones. And then finally we came to Measure B that
The council wouldn't do it.
they wouldn't do
kept
it.
approving
No,
new housing.
no.
And the school district just couldn't keep up with the housing, couldn't build
Oh,
enough
no, no.
facilities.
Oh, no, they didn't have any more schools. I mean, that was
Yeah.
it, and they had to do this, what they did. So my kids were all involved with that, yeah.
So the idea, what did the initiative specify?
Well, specifically that the housing builders had to provide some relief to the schools of some kind. And that actually ended up mostly being portables.
So it didn't say no new housing.
No,
It said if
it
you're going to
said
build
you're
new
gonna-
housing,
yes,
you
then
have
you
to
have to
compensate the
help.
schools somehow.
Right,
Walt Hayes, who was
Well,
on the
he was
city
on the
council and
council,
was an
yeah.
attorney, he actually wrote the initiative.
right, he did. And carried it through to the state Supreme Court, and it's now state law.
So he figured out the legal language
Right,
that
that
proved,
made it.
that was approved by the
Right,
courts,
Right, as
right
well
up
as
to the
passed.
state, and I think the U.S. Supreme Court,
I
right?
don't know about that.
Yeah.
I think it's
think-
at least it's for the state,
yes.
which is a really big
Yes,
deal when
but
you
it
think
w-
about it.
I think it was appealed to the U.S. Supreme
Right.
Court. So did you have any idea what you were taking on? I mean,
No,
San Jose
no.
had an old pro-growth, power elite, build, grow. And here you bunch of women and
Middle-
plus Walt Hayes from the
Well, there were other men.
from the Almaden Valley
Yeah.
took them on.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea what you were
Well,
doing?
no, not at all. In fact, we didn't even really know who would be opposed, but it was interesting the people who came out in support
Yeah.
because they saw the same problem that that kids were just being dumped on the street, basically.
So you got it qualified for the ballot by petition. I
Right.
expect you went
A
door
lot
to
of
door.
work.
Yeah.
And we'd go down the street, and every single person would sign, every adult living in that household,
Wow.
all over Almaden,
Wow.
Oak Grove,
Yeah.
Willow Glen.
Berryessa too, I think. So you get it on the ballot. Did you have a lot of money for the campaign?
Oh, no. In
No.
fact, I don't even remember whether we had any. The San Jose Teachers Union supplied an office.
Yeah.
So somehow or other, the bills got paid. And, I can't remember if we ever took in a penny, but I'm sure we did.
Yeah, not a lot.
No,
I
not
mean,
a lot.
mostly you did
Yeah.
leaflets and went door to door, right?
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Yeah. And then we were, supported by Mort Levine and the Sun newspaper.
The Sun newspaper
Yes.
supported you, which were the really important weekly
Right. And
newspaper locally.
they were
yeah.
very up on everything that was
Yeah.
going on.
The
and-
Mercury News?
No,
No, not so much.
no, they didn't support us.
The mayor, Mayor Mineta?
I think, as far as I remember, Norm kind of it never came up. Let's put it that way.
He didn't like it.
He didn't like it.
Well, he was
know.
worried that it would actually halt building. It turns
Yeah.
out, of course, it didn't do
No,
that.
it didn't do that.
Who else opposed it?
Well, the Builders Association.
Oh, the builders.
yeah.
And they spent some money.
Yes, they did.
I know there were full-page newspaper
Yeah.
ads.
And their point was that the schools in the city or the subdivisions just didn't really have any. I mean, it wasn't their business, the builders' business, to worry about the school capacity. That was the school district's
of course.
capacity
They would say
problem.
that, yeah.
Right.
And the League of Women Voters supported
Oh, they
the
did
measure
too.
So that's
yeah, they
important.
did.
That's always a
And,
credible source of support.
And Frank Fiscalini did too.
Who became a council member,
Well, he was the
and he was
superintendent of schools for East
Side Union
Side
High
Union
School
at the
District.
time.
Yeah.
But Chuck Knight did not.
He was San Jose Unified.
right.
So what
They
happened
were
on
nice to
what
us.
happened on election day?
Well, we won, of course.
By a lot?
I don't
A few.
remember.
You won by a few percentage points, but it was a turnaround. And in that same election, Susie Wilson got elected to the city council. Jim Self got elected to the city council. So
We
there
began
started to be
yeah.
council members
Yeah.
who agreed with your positions on managing growth.
Yeah. And now, of course, it's part of the city ordinance. I mean, it's part of the whole planning structure, and it now includes parks as well as schools.
It actually had a big impact statewide and nationally because concurrency now is the key, that when you build housing concurrently, you provide schools, parks, community centers, and libraries.
Yeah.
So you started something really big.
Well, you know, when you get started in something like that, you don't really have any idea of what's going to happen. It's like the pink hat ladies, you know, you don't know always. But it was an interesting experience. I never felt the least bit unhappy about it. We worked really hard. We had a lot of really great people helping us. So, you know, it just was wonderful.
Well, you made history. Congratulations, and thank you, Claire Benson.
Thank you, Terry.
For other interviews with the leaders and activists who shaped the history of San Jose and Santa Clara County, look for the Valley Politics History Interviews on YouTube. I'm Terry Christensen. Thanks for watching.